Severe weather can strike at any time, and you can take steps now to help keep you and your family safe. The Storm Track 3 team looks back at the biggest local impacts over the last century. We've got you covered on how to be ready for the worst. Project Tornado starts right now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Chief Meteorologist Nick Hausen. It's known as the most powerful weather on the planet, changing landscapes and changing lives in the blink of an eye.
A tornado is defined as a violently rotating column of air. It extends from the base of a thunderstorm to the ground, and even those on the weaker side can uproot trees and destroy buildings.
The strongest tornadoes have some of the highest wind speeds on Earth, with winds reaching 180 miles per hour, snapping trees like toothpicks and flattening homes in the blink of an eye.
We may think of spring as a typical severe weather season, but tornadoes can occur at any time of the year. Some of the strongest tornadoes we've seen in our region have occurred in the colder months, often when the sun goes down.
Nighttime tornadoes are more than twice as likely to be deadly, but they only make up about 25% of all tornadoes. However, about 40% of tornado-related deaths occur during nocturnal events. Now, imagine a large destructive tornado occurring just before sunrise during the winter. It's a nightmare scenario that played out 10 years ago in Harrisburg.
February 29th, 2012. It's the leap day that many in Saline and Gallatin counties will never forget.
Oh, he looked like a bomb went off.
Just like it was in Joplin, just like it was everywhere, just shock.
You go down Barnett Street and it's just totally wiped out pretty much. And then you come down here and it's just, everything's just gone.
Just before 5 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, Doug Cottom and his wife Stacy woke to hail hitting their bedroom window. Then the tornado warning coming over their cell phones.
We grabbed our dog and made our way to the bathroom. She laid down in the bathtub, and then almost at the same time, I started to sit down on the edge of the bathtub, and we heard what sounded like a jet engine.
That sound was the tornado bearing down on the Cottom's duplex.
We started to hear the nails being pulled out of our home, basically like you use a hammer and pull nails out of a board.
Moving at more than 60 miles per hour, and winds up to 180 miles per hour, the tornado tore through the southeast side of Harrisburg, destroying everything in its path.
We were literally taken across the street over the other houses out into a field on the other side of the street, and somehow survived it.
Many of their neighbors, not so lucky. In total, 8 people lost their lives that morning, 7 of them living in the duplexes neighboring the Cottoms.
We knew those people real well. They were our next door neighbors. In fact, the one gal was connected to us in that duplex. So that was, without question, that was the toughest part.
It's been 10 years now, and the area that was left mangled by the tornado looks much different. And those who led the recovery and rebuild have had time to reflect.
After all these years, the big thing that sticks out to me is how we came together. You know, how, not only this community within itself, but the neighboring communities across the state, across the Midwest.
Eric Gregg was the Harrisburg mayor back in 2012 and had to separate emotion, knowing many of those who lost everything, to become the leader his community needed.
I think about the words of encouragement from the families that lost the most, from the families that lost loved ones, and how they kind of pushed us to be the best that we could be.
Decisions that allowed people to get the help they needed. Despite FEMA denying federal assistance to Harrisburg, the community pushed through.
We will move forward. We're going to get up and we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to do it in honor of everything that's happened. Those we lost, the families, everybody that lost everything they owned. We're going to stand up and we're going to keep moving forward.
After more than a month in the hospital, Doug Cottom was finally released to begin picking up the pieces and reflecting on the experience.
We had what we later were told was survivor's remorse. We couldn't understand how 4 people on our left and 3 people on our right had lost their lives, and somehow we survived.
Today, they live in a rebuilt duplex in exactly the same spot. Doug says it was something his wife insisted to beat the tornado.
A humorous side, we kind of like our chances now of where we live of not being hit again. I don't know if that means anything or not, but the chances of another tornado coming right through there, right on top of us, are, I would think, pretty remote.
And he says the tornado has made them more aware of what's really important in life. They are so thankful to be alive that none of the rest mattered.
Surviving an EF4 tornado can be difficult, even if you receive the warning and head to an interior room on your lowest floor.
That's right. The Cottoms survived the Harrisburg tornado by seeking shelter in a bathroom. But how a building is constructed can play a major role in whether or not it can stand in winds of up to 200 miles per hour. When the warning goes off, this is the time to seek shelter.
The basic safety rule is to get to the lowest part of a building and put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. It's just trying to protect yourself from that flying and falling debris, which does the majority of the injuries and fatalities.
Even in the strongest tornadoes, that's sometimes not enough. As Graves County Emergency Management Director Tracy Warner saw firsthand.
Unfortunately, the way the tornado came through Mayfield, a lot of homes were completely flattened.
Wind so strong it drove pieces of siding into trees. Tim Marshall is a meteorologist and a forensic engineer. He is called in to help the National Weather Service assess the damage in the strongest hurricanes and tornadoes. He was in Mayfield days following the deadly tornado in December.
We're taking a closer look now at how buildings are built. And we're finding out that, there's a lot of flaws in some of these construction. We call them fatal flaws, where it actually fails. And we're finding that it doesn't take a 200 or even a 300 mile an hour wind to knock down a house.
Marshall looks at the finer details, to when a building was built and to how it was constructed.
If you go back and look at the way the building codes have been, and being in a rural area, the contractors have to basically follow the minimum. That would be around a 90 mile per hour, 3-second gust equivalent. So that's not very much, and this tornado had wind speeds of up to 190 miles an hour.
Wood-framed homes that are built on concrete or crawl spaces are often attached poorly, or not at all. Other buildings, made of brick, like this old church, may have been safe on one side, but not the other.
There was a church that had two kind of stairways on either side. And one was completely filled with 10 feet of brick masonry. Certainly would not have been a good place to be. But the other one on the other side was fine.
To survive such a strong tornado, it requires being underground or in a storm shelter. But buildings built stronger can go a long way.
Tornadoes are going to be around, and we just have to deal with that. Can we build better for them? Yes, we can. But don't leave it up to the building code. You'll have to take matters into your own hands and build a better building if you want to.
Marshall, along with Warner, hope to see Mayfield rebuilt and constructed better, and hopes that more plans are ahead of time in case a disaster strikes again.
You don't have a plan, you need to come up with one, because it could save your life.
Coming up next, the Storm Track 3 team takes you back in time to look at the deadliest tornado ever in the United States, and we explain how it compares to a more recent tornado disaster in our region.
March 18th, 1925, on an unseasonably warm afternoon, the deadliest tornado in U.S. history passed right near this spot. West Frankfort was one of 2 towns in southern Illinois that saw a loss of life more than 100.
Just try to imagine the disorientation of coming out from wherever you had, digging out or coming out.
That's what it was like in Murfreesboro and for many other communities along a 219-mile tornado path, March 18, 1925. Crossing parts of 3 states, it's simply known as the Tri-State Tornado. And it's the longest tracking tornado in U.S. history, and also the deadliest, claiming 695 lives and injuring more than 2,000. It may sound like a nightmare, but it happened here, and it's a storm that still leaves scientists mystified.
It looked like an environment that would happen today in the spring. You know, it occurred in mid-March. We get these systems every year, but for some reason, Mother Nature decided to put on a show that day.
Mount Vernon native John Hart, who is a lead forecaster for the Storm Prediction Center in Oklahoma, has studied tornadoes extensively, and he spent a lot of time studying the tri-state tornado.
These people were caught off guard. They were caught out in fields. Children were in schools. People were down in the mines. It hit Murfreesboro and West Frankfort, and people were at work. It was a weekday. So the first knowledge anyone would have that a bad storm was coming was the sky got dark.
And by that time, it was too late.
Employees at the ice plant here in town, that they had to take cover in the ice locker. Another person was at the company store, the railroad company store, and they took cover in a vault of some sort.
Pictures of the tornado's aftermath, like these, line the wall at the Jackson County Historical Society, highlighting the path, which could not have been worse. Gorham, destroyed. 2 schools were hit in Murfreesboro. In DeSoto, 33 of the town's 69 that died were in a school. Farther east, miners in West Frankfort came above ground to find their houses gone, their wives and children lying in the rubble, and the small community of Parrish nearly wiped off the map. That night, it was the fires. They ravaged parts of Murfreesboro, and the effects of the damage would last for years.
For Murfreesboro, it was a real financial, economic game changer because Murfreesboro apparently had been a real boomtown up until the time of the tornado.
Today, you have to know where to look to see signs of the tornado. This marker sits in Longfellow Park. Longfellow School once sat right here. Homes now have been built in place where many others were destroyed.
Over the last century, meteorologists have wondered what the impact from the tri-state tornado would look like if it were to occur today. Would the destruction be worse, or are we better prepared? The closest comparison we have took place on December 10th.
There's obviously some differences, but in many ways they were the same.
Although the 2 tornadoes roared through our region during different times of the year, Pat Spoden, Science and Operations Officer at the National Weather Service in Paducah, says the atmospheric environment wasn't that different.
The main difference was that when you go back and you do the analysis, it actually traveled with the surface low, whereas the December 10th did not. It was much farther to the south. But the environment is somewhat the same.
What was different was the track of the tri-state tornado.
With the December 10th tornado, it went through, several towns, but it went through probably twice as many towns with the tri-state tornado. So you have a lot more opportunity to do a lot more damage and hurt a lot more people.
Christine Welgus, warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Paducah, says that people in 1925 also weren't prepared.
The U.S. Weather Bureau, which was what the National Weather Service was called back then, they weren't really even allowed to talk about tornadoes. People knew what they were, people feared them, but the U.S. Weather Bureau at the time did not issue tornado warnings.
Without warnings, people had to rely on word of mouth.
You might have had telephones, people telling people down the line that this was coming, but otherwise, it would happen in the middle of the day, happened in the afternoon, so people probably would have seen it coming. But they would have had no warning that it was possible.
Science, warnings, and preparedness have come a long way through the years, ultimately saving lives.
I think a lot of people are a lot more weather aware than, used to be. And it depends on a lot where you grow up and that kind of stuff. But still, people in this area have always been weather aware, and you have events like this that just it notches it up.
Knowing where you need to go and how long it takes to get there will help you get to safety before it's too late.
The main messages we've been talking about for years: inner room, lowest floor of the home, basements, storm shelters. We have proof from the EF4 that saves lives. There were many structures we saw where only the inner room was left, and people survived in those. They survived in bathtubs. They survived, wherever they could. And so those things still ring true.
I think that's a huge part of how this was different. And is it why almost 700 people died? that they didn't have that warning? You'll never know. Was it because it hit so many communities? You know, you'll never know. But I do know we're in a much better place today because of the improvements and advancements that we've made, not only technology, but you know, the way we reach people.
Coming up next,
there actually has been a shift of Tornado Alley.
The Storm Track 3 team looks at the climate surrounding severe weather and helps you prepare for the next tornado outbreak.
From flooding to when and where severe weather happens, the climate is changing, and that can have big impacts. Understanding this change can help us better prepare for the future.
Climate is what you expect, weather is what you get. Climate might determine what kind of home you build, weather determines what you're going to wear today.
Dr. Justin Schoaf, the director of the School of Earth Systems and Sustainability and professor at SIU Carbondale, has spent years studying climate, and what he's found is troubling.
What we know is that over the last couple of decades, there actually has been a shift of Tornado Alley.
Schoaf says that the area, commonly referred to as Tornado Alley, has moved eastward.
Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, the southern part of our viewing region. This is an area that has always had a high level of tornado activity, but in the last couple of decades, it's really even increased more so.
But tornadoes aren't the only concern. Schoaf says locally, our region is trending warmer and wetter.
On average, we're going to get more rain, right? We see that come out in the data already. That's already observed. We also see a tendency for extreme precipitation to increase.
Much of that rain has been in the spring, which can make it difficult for farmers during planting season.
Annually, Carbondale is now getting about an extra third of an inch of rain a decade that we wouldn't have gotten in 1950. So if you think about that, since 1950, we've added about 2.5 inches of rainfall to our annual average.
One of the biggest changes in local data is the length of the frost and freeze season.
It turns out that since 1950, we've got about an extra month from the last freeze in the spring till the first freeze in the fall. That's really remarkable. So what does that mean? Well, it means maybe we have a longer growing season. That can be good, but not if it's accompanied by more hydroclimatic variability.
Understanding changes in our climate globally and locally will help us be better prepared for our day-to-day lifestyles and severe weather events.
We have to be aware that as long as the right ingredients are present, we can get tornadoes and other types of severe weather any time of year.
To be prepared for whatever Mother Nature throws our way, you need to do your part, and that means having a plan and having a preparedness kit. One that Franklin County Emergency Manager Ryan Buckingham says you should have basic essential supplies that you may need in your home.
Preparedness kits should be based off of individual needs and also the needs of your family. So you're going to want to have those basic supplies like non-perishable foods, water, a first aid kit, flashlight, maybe something to shut off the gas in your home if you have gas.
The American Red Cross recommends having, at minimum, a 2-week supply of non-perishable food and 1 gallon of water per person per day for 2 weeks. A first aid kit, a week's supply of medicine, copies of personal documents, a flashlight, extra batteries, and common household tools. Head over to our website to download a complete list of items to have in your preparedness kit.
The Storm Track 3 team is always tracking that next big system to help keep you and your family safe. And now we have a new tool to help us do just that, the Storm Tracker. Inside the Storm Tracker, we have access to models that we typically have inside the studio. So everything that we can do while at the TV station, we can do right here in the van. It's an essentially on-the-go weather studio. And the best part of it is we're not only able to look at the data and keep you up to date with the latest forecasts, but we can actually give you real-time visuals of what we're seeing in the field. This new tool will allow multiple meteorologists to keep you up to date when active weather strikes. You'll be getting a report from the TV station of the radar, but then we'll also show you the severity of the weather heading your way.
Now, despite major advancements in forecasting, pinpointing exactly where a tornado will occur just days in advance is not possible, and it may never be.
That's why it's so important to plan and prepare. before a watch or a warning is issued, and it could save your life.
Because it's not if severe storms will occur again, it's when, and they can happen any time of the year.
And the Storm Track 3 team is always tracking on News 3 at WSILTV.com and on the Storm Track 3 app. We've got you covered.